You're listening to the Real Women in Business podcast. I'm your host, Cass McCrory, and in this podcast, we highlight women in all kinds of businesses. For yourself, someone else, full-time, part-time, overtime hustle, together we will learn from and with one another. And if we get it right, it'll lift us all. Let's get into it. Friends, I'm so excited to introduce you to Jenn Collins. By the end of this episode, you're going to feel like you're friends with her too. Jenn is a positive force for good, and she brings that to life in her work as a real estate agent and as a mom and wife. I am so excited. She is going to dig in and share her secrets to connecting with people. She's going to share an amazing technique that I'd never heard of for starting great conversations. She's just going to share the practice that makes her days better and kind of how she's wired for work too. I can't wait for you to listen in. Jenn, welcome.
Thank you, Cass. I'm so excited to be here.
So you and I met actually through your husband and work. And over the course of the last, I think it's almost been a year now, I've been following what you do. And I'm so excited for people to learn more about you. So I'll ask you to kick us off and tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do.
Thank you so much. Yeah. So I am a real estate agent in the San Francisco Bay Area. I specialize primarily in the East Bay. So kind of 680, 24 corridors, going into Oakland and Berkeley sometimes for my clients as needed. And I've been doing this for about 4 years. And then I also am a mom of 2 young girls and have my husband and a big Bernese Mountain Dog to kind of round out the family.
Awesome. I'd love to learn more about the journey that got you to here, because I know that you didn't start out as a realtor.
I did not. I actually started out of college in financial services. And after I was in school in South Florida, even though I grew up here in California, and after 9/11 happened, I kind of reevaluated why I was in South Florida when the rest of my family was on the other side of the country, and decided to move back to California and to the Bay Area. And from there, I honestly kind of fell into commercial real estate. My mom was working in the commercial real estate industry, and I was unhappy in financial services. So I made a career change at that point. And then I was working in commercial real estate for about 10 years. My husband and I, at that point, decided to open a yoga studio. So I rebuilt that from the ground up, and right after that happened, I got pregnant with our first daughter. And so I said to my husband, I can't have a commercial real estate business, a yoga business, and be a mom. So I decided to let go of the commercial real estate for a while. And then we ran the studio for about 4 years. We decided to sell it. And then after that, I said, I still want to be able to contribute to my family. I still want to have my girls see a strong role model for them as they grow up. And so I decided to go into residential real estate instead of working on the commercial side. So It's been a long journey.
Yeah. And so in the middle of this, you're running a yoga studio. Were you a yogi or?
Yes. So one thing that you might not know about my husband is that he actually taught yoga for 22 years. I taught yoga for about 6. And that's actually how we met, was through yoga.
That's so interesting.
Yeah.
Wow. So
different journeys. It was something that was unexpected. And it was one of those things where we would have always regretted it if we hadn't done it. And we're super glad that we did it. And it's also a different time of our lives now.
I think that some people will hear this and they'll be like, oh, wow, this is really interesting that you've had such a varied career. And I think that's true. Do you see, I'm curious, from the commercial real estate side to the residential real estate side, is it like 2 different businesses, or were they like putting on an old hat?
So they are, logistically speaking, 2 very, very different businesses. There's some crossover in that you are running your own business in each industry. You're an independent contractor. And so you really have to be a motivated self-starter. It's definitely not, a corporate environment. You are responsible for the business that you develop and that you create.
Yeah.
Yeah. But the deals themselves are very, very different.
Yeah. I can imagine that it would be,
Yeah.
you can habitually, you're tapping into the same habits, but the market is completely different.
Exactly right.
Interesting. So you're in South Florida and you're in school for financial services and 9/11 happens. And I mean, for me too, I was in college when 9/11 happened and it was like,
Yeah, you
everything.
reevaluate.
Yeah, it was a big values check-in. Like
Hmm.
what, and how did that go for you? I know it brought you back to California. Did it expose like, I don't want to be away, or was it that I want to be near people?
Well, the interesting thing was I was working for a company in South Florida in financial services, and I was actually right in the process of going through a transfer up to Manhattan, and I was going to start work in with a company that we had just acquired, and they were located, unfortunately, in the second tower. So it hit really close to home for me. And at that point, I just said, my entire family is on the West Coast, and I really don't have anything tying me here to the East Coast any longer. So, where do I want to be long term? And that's what prompted that move.
I love that you were looking at that moment and saying, where do I want to be? Because I think sometimes we can put on blinders towards what we think we wanted in one moment. And I love that you were open to reevaluating.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that especially with something as life altering as that moment was, so for
Yeah.
so many people, um, I do feel like I did it with I wasn't reactionary about it. It took some time for me to finally make the move, but yeah, it was definitely a thoughtful process for me.
Awesome. So, one of the things that I see in the media all of the time is kind of, how hard it is to be a woman in business. And while I think that is true, I think that there's also great advantages. So I'd love to learn from you kind of what you see as an advantage of being a woman in business.
Yeah, that's a great question. For me, and especially in my role as a real estate agent, very often helping people with what might be one of the largest financial transactions that they make in their entire lives. Um, I think my biggest advantage right now is the compassion that I have for my clients, especially as a woman and as a mom. Recognizing that uh, this is not something that my clients do every day. It's something that I do every day, but this is something that they might do, once every 10 years. And having compassion for their thought process, having compassion for their fears and concerns, and um, their goals that they're trying to achieve through this purchase or through this sale, I think is really important. And I think that that is reflected a lot in the conversations that I have with my clients. One of the things that I talk to people about when I first meet with them is my number one goal is to help my clients do what's right for them, regardless of the outcome of the transaction. Yes, obviously, it would be great to have everything, all the stars align and every transaction go perfectly, but it doesn't always happen that way. And I want my clients to know that I am on their team 100% of the time. And I really feel that, even if something falls apart and it doesn't work out for a client for whatever reason, um, you know, the way that you treat them with that type of compassion and that sort of sense of partnership really pays off in the long run, because they're going to remember that. They're going to remember that feeling that you created for them and that experience that they had with you. And then they're going to refer you to friends and family and other people as well.
Yeah, I think that's really awesome, and I love that you put that out there as your number one goal. It brings up something really interesting, and as we're recording this, you haven't actually had a chance to listen to the other episodes yet because they're not out, which is tricky. But in several of these conversations, what's come up is this idea of teaming and
Mm-hmm.
being on the same side as people. And I've heard this from women, and I never really made the connection until just now listening to you talk about it. Women have a great capacity to team with people and to be on their side. And I think that that is a really unique advantage.
I absolutely agree with you. And I think that, I feel that a lot of time, as a woman and as a mom, I'm trying to create consensus, right? And so whether it's with my clients or whether it's with my daughter's eating her vegetables, you're trying to get people to work with you and to be on the same team. And I think you're right. I think that is something very unique to women.
Yeah, because I think about a lot of my interactions with men in business. There's a win and a lose component to it.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a really different energy when you're working with women because it's consensus building.
Yeah.
That is so interesting. I'm going to have to dig into that more because that just is like lightning bolts of ideas and questions come from there. So you mentioned your daughters.
Mm-hmm.
If you were to give them advice about their career, what would you say?
Well, we do a lot of mindset work in our house and, just encouraging our daughters to be positive and be optimistic. But I think if I were going to give them specific advice about, looking into the future as they grow older, I think it's really important for people to find mentors. And I think especially, in business, that's not something that is often discussed, but I think that that's something that really, really helps people to grow and to develop. And I don't even mean just business. I have a business coach. I also have a health coach. I look at all sorts of different people where I pull inspiration from them, whether it's another mom that I love. I have a few that just immediately pop to mind, and how I want to kind of cultivate my relationships with my kids based on what I see them doing, whether it's, a coach at the gym or, a coach on the field, but finding those mentors that can help you grow and develop your craft, I think is really, really important and not something that's often encouraged.
I completely agree with you. And I think that I have, in the last few years, have really expanded how I define mentor.
Mm-hmm.
And that, people that I'll follow, whether that's Tim Ferriss or Beth Comstock or, I can see them as a mentor, even though they're not personally mentoring me. I see their work as a gift of mentorship.
Absolutely. I mean, even, the podcasts that you listen to or the books that you read, all of those, I think, fall under some sort of mentorship where you're growing and developing and becoming a more rounded, well-rounded, better version of what you were.
So tell me, what are you listening to? What are you reading? How are you growing right now?
Oh my gosh. So I always have a few books going at any one time. Right now, I'm actually rereading a book that I really love called Mindset by Carol Dweck. I also have a book club that I belong to. So sometimes I read for just straight pleasure. And then, I mentioned my business coach. We have, daily podcast and private Facebook pages and all sorts of things that we learn from that organization with as well.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've been really into this book, Atomic Habits by James Clear. It is an amazing, revelatory look at how we take incremental action. It's a great read. I definitely recommend that one.
Well, I will definitely check that one out.
You've mentioned mindset a couple of times. I'd love to know how that works in real life.
Yeah, I mean, it's, obviously I'm not perfect at it, but I think it's that desire just to stay positive. And, when I was in commercial real estate, I used to cold call. That was how I generated all my business. And I would come home from work and I'd say, to my husband, I got hung up on 50 times today, but I am so close to a yes. And he thought I was nuts. And, not everybody can do that. And I understand that. But it is that desire to just continue to see the good in things. And even when you have a rough day, recognizing that, that tomorrow will be different, and staying focused on your goals and your ambitions, and what your big why is. As I'm looking around my office right now, I've got motivational sayings up all over the place. I've got my vision board. I've got, cards that people have given me that are inspirational to me. I've got quotes. I've got my goals, so just kind of putting everything right in your face all the time so that you stay focused on it.
How long have you been working with vision boards?
Oh boy, I have been working with vision boards. That's a good question. Let me think now. About almost 10 years.
Awesome.
Yeah.
And have you been surprised? Have you found yourself creating the life that you've envisioned?
So I have a funny story about that. My husband and I had a goal to purchase a beach house, and we do vision boards kind of jointly and then independently also. And so we had this goal. We probably set it 4 or 5 years ago, and as I mentioned, I have my vision boards up in my office, but I also have them on my bathroom mirror with some other things that I like to just kind of track and measure. And one morning I was brushing my teeth and I looked over and I said to myself, why is this picture of our beach house on my vision board? And then I realized it wasn't our beach house. It was a picture that I had created, that I cut out from a magazine, of what I wanted our beach house to look like. And literally down to the view, to the vaulted ceilings, everything looks exactly the same. And I just glanced at it and was like, oh, and I get chills right now thinking about it. But yeah, I mean, I wholeheartedly believe in vision boards.
I have chills too.
Yeah.
I have a similar situation where I had created, just cut out from magazines and, Pottery Barn catalog and Restoration Hardware. This is, gosh, before Lexi was even born. So 12, 13 years ago, something like that. And over the course of moving several times, this particular vision board was on a piece of paper, and I folded it up and I put it in a tote bin. And when we moved to the house that I now live in, I was cleaning out some of these boxes, of course, because I wouldn't clean them out before we moved. I have to wait until I schlepped them all over the state and everything. Of course. And I open it up and I'm like, what is this? And like the carpet, the sofa, the light fixtures, all of the very specific details that I did not like pick out based on this picture, but they are in our home today. Just wild.
It's really amazing when you plant that seed in your brain and you look at it day in and day out, how that just happens. It's really amazing.
Have you done vision boards with your kids yet?
Not yet. So it's funny that you mentioned that, because I'm actually chairing my daughter's school auction right now. And one of the parent-hosted parties is a vision board making party. And so I signed up to bring her to that. And so she's 6, so she's a little bit young, but we'll have a good time cutting out some magazine things.
Yeah, I was working on mine this past January, and Lexi, who's now 10, was watching me, and she was like, what is this about? And I was like, oh, I'm just, making a vision board. And she was curious about it, but I didn't make that invitation because I just wasn't sure if I wanted her to be that powerful yet.
Right?
Like, I don't want to be going to places I don't want to go to because she's envisioned it. So it's such a high vibe that I'm stuck going to every Harry Potter place in the world.
Right, exactly. Because, at 6 and 10, they have different visions of what they want to achieve or acquire. So, yeah,
All
you
too
do have to
true.
be a little careful.
All too true.
Right.
So I'm curious, you are a very positive person, and I can imagine that you are just always bringing the joy into every situation, but I'm curious what things you do, with intention to bring that joy into your life each week.
Yeah. So obviously we've talked a lot about vision boards, but from those vision boards, right, you have to have some tactical things about how are you going to get to that vision? Because you might have a vision to go live in Paris for a month. And well, if you don't have a plan, it's just kind of a dream. Mm-hmm. And so I write down my daily and annual goals every day. I have a journal that I carry around, which also happens to have another set of my vision board pictures and goals and things like that. And I literally write them down every morning. I also write down every evening, usually about 3 things that I'm grateful for. So, just kind of trying to create that moment in my mind and that space about what happened that was a success today. Even if it's something like, I have a 2-year-old daughter, and even if it's kissing her goodnight and having her say, "I love you" back, just that sort of moment that you just want to hold on to. And it's funny because when I first started doing this, I've never been a really big journaler. And I had always, like, every January, I'd say, I'm going to journal this year. And I would start and I'd write 3 pages, and I'm a little OCD. So if I had to scratch something out, I had to throw out the journal. And so I finally just said, you know what, forget it. It doesn't matter if I have to scratch it out. I will just, start on the next page and start on the next page. And so I'm actually getting close to finishing my very first journal. And a lot of it is just gratitude. It's just things that I'm grateful for and moments that I want to remember throughout my day. And that really helps me stay grounded and create that joy.
I love that. One of my mentors is a woman named Jess Lively, and she has this thing where she says, "Thank you more, please."
Oh, yes. So true.
And I just
Absolutely.
love that. And I think that having a gratitude practice is one of those things that grounds you into the goodness. So I love that you're talking about that. That's awesome.
Yeah. And I love "thank you more, please." I'm gonna borrow that.
Right? I mean, it just says everything in one succinct little phrase that it's definitely a magnet.
Yep. And we haven't even talked about the law of attraction.
I know. Well, oh gosh. I mean, you go down the law of attraction bandwagon and I'm just,
Yeah.
What law of attraction, like, guru do you turn to?
Oh gosh. I mean, I've read through a lot of different ones. And I'm horrible with names. So, and because I have a Kindle now, I don't have a lot of physical books. So I always forget titles. So, but you could probably name it and I would say, oh yes, I've read this, and this from them. But I definitely am a big proponent of the law of attraction.
I've been really into Abraham Hicks.
Yes. So, funny story. My hairstylist actually got me into Abraham Hicks.
Interesting. Yeah. I think, I was reading the second or the third book, and I was somehow skipping the intros. I had just gotten them out of the library. And so I didn't realize that it was channeled until I was rereading the Law of Attraction book. And I was like, oh, wow, that's really out there. I really like that. It is so out there.
It is very out there, but it's really powerful.
It is. And that really opened up a whole lot of other things for me. And Sonia Roman and Sonia Choquette, they all have some really interesting things around law of attraction and kind of a greater calling. I think that's what I'll...
Well, and, obviously, like Tony Robbins as well. Yeah. And I don't know if you've read any of Napoleon Hill's work, but, all of those are right in the same genre.
The thing that I've been noticing lately, and I'm curious if you've seen this too, is I've read these works, and then I'll read a traditional book, and I'll see the manifestation. I'll see the law of attraction at work, and it's not called that. Mm-hmm. But it's so clearly like, well, obviously this worked because of that.
Now, when you say a traditional book, what do you mean by a traditional book? I haven't noticed that.
Good to Great from Jenn Collins.
Oh, yes. Okay. Yes, absolutely.
No relation, I'm assuming.
No relation. read the book, but no relation.
But when I was reading that book, I was like, well, yeah, like there is just manifestation and law of attraction happening all over the place here, and mindset work.
Yes, absolutely.
And you can call it, whatever you want to call it, but that's what it is at the root. So I think it's just so interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. It's there's so many different books that you can dig into with that, and different people that you can learn from.
That's awesome. All right, we're going to shift the conversation a little bit away from the woo, but we may just go right back, because
that's okay.
If the universe wants us to go there, that's where we're going.
Exactly.
I'm curious. I know that so many people look at you as a go-to person. What are they always asking you about?
Oh gosh. Well, they always ask about how's the real estate market.
Yeah.
Question number one, right? How's the real estate market? And my answer is always, it depends on if you're a buyer or a seller. So, I realized after I left commercial real estate and when I went into teaching and running a yoga studio, I realized that the thing that I love to do, I love two kind of components. One, I love to be the expert. So I love it when people come to me with a question that they don't have the answer to, and I can either give them the answer or help them find the answer. So that really is, it works very well in my current work, because so many people, I work with a lot of first-time home buyers. They don't understand the process yet. They don't know, they don't know what they don't know yet. And so being their guide and, earning their trust and getting to work with them to help them through what is unfortunately a fairly complicated process. And so that to me is something that people, I think, definitely go to me for. And then also I would say the other thing that I learned is I really love to be a connector. So, whether I'm talking to you and you mention something to me about, I want to learn X, Y, and Z, and I happen to know somebody who teaches X, Y, and Z, then putting the two of you guys together to have a conversation. And that is something that I've carried through all of my work, whether it be in commercial real estate, residential real estate, or in yoga. And that's something I get a deep joy from helping people find what they need.
I love that. Were you always that way?
Boy, that's a good question. Probably not. I think it's something that has developed over the years because, obviously you can't, until you have a database of people that or a sphere of people that that you can direct people to, you can't really do much connecting.
Mm-hmm. What have you done that's helped kind of develop that even more?
As my husband says, I'll talk to anybody. So I'm definitely an extrovert, and I don't have a fear of going up and talking to any. I'm the person that has conversations in the checkout line at the grocery store with people, and so I think that's really kind of developed that sphere of people that I know, sphere of people that I'm connected with. And then just trying to provide value to people. Again, whether it's connecting somebody with, a vendor that they need, or, a service provider, or the right moms group, or, finding the right home for them, just kind of developing that network for people.
I love that. I want to get a little bit in the weeds because I know that, for a lot of the listeners of this podcast, based on, the other people that I've interviewed, many of us identify as introverts. So the idea of making conversation with somebody at a checkout line is, foreign. How do you do that? Like what specifically, how do you start a conversation with somebody in that type of setting or in any setting? Because I think I have a great fear personally of being so awkward in that moment, and it paralyzes me sometimes.
Yeah. I think it starts with a smile.
Yeah.
um, and, I think from there, it's just a matter of, um, saying hello and, um, whether it's, a conversation about, oh gosh, boy, you have a lot of, just using the checkout example, right? Boy, you have a lot of, interesting things there on the checkout line. What are you making for dinner tonight? That looks amazing. Um, Something like that, just a very kind of safe conversation starter.
Mm-hmm.
If I'm going to a more formal networking event, there's all sorts of tricks and things that you can use. I don't know if you've heard of the F.O.R.D technique before.
No, tell me about that.
Yeah, so the F.O.R.D technique is a great way to kind of develop a conversation with people and dig deeper into some interesting discussions with them. So you start with family. Hi, I'm Jenn Collins. So nice to meet you. Where are you from? Where does your family live? Do you have kids? Obviously you don't want to be bombarding them with questions, right? The most important thing is if you can get them talking to you and you're listening. Like we use the ratio of we want to be doing the talking when, like, if I'm sitting at the dining room table with somebody over a listing presentation, I want to be talking about 25% of the time. I want them talking 75% of the time because I want to be listening and I want to be hearing what it is that they need. And so, and that's a skill. I mean, I will say that it's very easy to, and you'll probably notice as you go around the next week, when you're talking to somebody, how quickly we tune out and how quickly we start thinking about, well, what am I going to say next? And just really listening and being present with people. So starting with family, moving to occupation, that's great. Oh my gosh, I have 2 kids too. Really? So where do you work? Or, what do you do? And digging into that a little bit more. Then you talk about recreation. So do you have any plans for the summer? We're going to go to X, Y, and Z place. What are you thinking about doing this summer with your family? Oh my gosh, that sounds amazing. I've never been there. It becomes a very natural conversation. And then from there, depending on timing and how deep you are connecting, you can get into dreams. Oh my gosh, you're going to Paris for the summer. I've always wanted to go to Paris. Where are some other places that you haven't been yet that you've always wanted to go? And then just creating that dialogue. And all of a sudden, you know a ton about somebody.
I love that. The F.O.R.D technique. We're going to provide a link to that in the show notes.
Awesome.
Because that is really actionable. And I love that it gives a little bit of structure for people that don't know where to start.
Yeah. And I totally understand that it can be, off-putting when you walk into a room of 100 people or even somebody at the checkout counter, right? And how do you start that? And so it is nice to have a little bit of a framework.
That's awesome. Tell me a little bit about a day in the life.
Boy, oh boy, it's so different every day, which is what I love about it, right? It's not never monotonous, that's for sure. So, boy, any day starts pretty early for me. I try to go to a yoga class in the morning first thing. Usually that's probably 3 times a week, and I'm trying to integrate some more running into my schedule also. So working out in the morning. And then it's really important to me to spend some time with my girls in the morning. So I will do drop off for them. I know lots of people that are in the office at 7 or 8, but I start a little bit later so that I can do school drop off for them. And then from there, it's, into the office. Depending on the day, it can be following up with leads. It can be showing homes. It can be writing offers, negotiating, going into inspections. There's just a whole gamut of different things that are needed. And then usually I'm home. I try to be home for dinner and bedtime so that I can, read them stories and tuck them in and check in on my older daughter's schoolwork and that sort of thing. And then I'll usually get back on the computer after they're in bed around 7:30 and keep working until, it depends, however long it takes.
So one of the things that keeps on coming up, Jenn, is the role of partnership in being a woman in business. And I'd love to hear about what that's like for you. What's your experience with being a married woman and a mom and a successful person in business?
Yeah, I mean, it's it's very interesting because I feel very, very blessed that my husband and I are partners. We're not business partners in the, aspect of like, he doesn't work in real estate at all. But we definitely bounce ideas off of each other. And he is great strategy, big picture person, and I'm very good with execution. And so, I mentioned that we do our vision boards together. So whether it is family structure and working together on how we manage and run our family, or even something like business and getting more into the nuts and bolts of, does this make sense on a proposal type of thing? And we definitely partner on that together. I would say that we have to have a shared calendar because, with my schedule, I'm all over the place. And so it's really important that we know who's available when and where. So I think that is something that is something that we try to do, sometimes really successfully, sometimes not so successfully, as things get moved around on the calendar. And then just, recognizing that we are, again, to go back to that concept of team, we're on the same team. We're doing this for the same reasons. We have the same goals, which again ties back into that vision board and like where we want our family to be 5 and 10 years from now. And so just remembering that even when we're making sacrifices, like I'm working on a weekend and, he's with the girls or, whatever the case might be, we're doing it because this is a plan. This is an intentional process that we're working through to get to where we want to be. So does that answer your question?
Totally does. I think that's really interesting. I think that, just to be really transparent, I think sometimes I've struggled with the balance of work when I don't put the intentionality up for conversation first.
Yeah.
Sometimes because I love work. I find work very fulfilling.
Yes.
Previous podcast guest, Whitney, she mentioned that she's wired for work. And I resonated with that so clearly. And so sometimes I will just go into work mode and not recognize, oh, it's 7:30 at night. If I'm not communicating the intentionality behind that to my partner, he might be getting the wrong idea about what really is important to me because my intention wasn't stated.
Right. No, it's absolutely true. And, my husband and I both work, we don't have 9-to-5 jobs. I don't know anybody who does anymore, but, so we definitely will check in once we're home for the evening. What's your plan tonight? Are you working? If you are, are we working at the same table together? Are we, if one partner is not working, can the other postpone something that they can either do tomorrow so that they can spend some time one-on-one with each other, Yeah. So it's, I think you have to stay focused on why you're doing all of this, because we all work really hard, and it is really hard to have a successful career, a successful marriage, and a successful family. And so you have to just remember why we're making some of the sacrifices that we do.
Mm-hmm. What do you hope your daughters see in you as a point of inspiration?
Wow, that is a really good question. So I am very fortunate because, again, my husband and I made the conscious decision. You mentioned Whitney, who said she's wired for work. Yeah. We made the conscious decision for me to go back to work. I could have stayed home with the girls. And that is a full-time job. Absolutely. I wanted to work. I love what I do, and I wanted to be contributing financially to our family. So I hope that my daughters see somebody who is driven to make our family's situation better. And I don't mean that necessarily just financially, but I mean that in all aspects. always constantly trying to improve the status quo. I hope that they see somebody who is inspiring in a positive light, who is mostly always smiling, and somebody who they find that they can look up to.
I think they will.
Thank you.
All right. What is something I should have asked you, but I haven't yet?
That is a tough one. I think we've covered a lot of ground.
We have.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sometimes this always comes up, and, one of my guests is like, you need my recipe for overnight oatmeal. And I was like, oh, I think I do need that recipe. Like, it was just such a silly, simple hack that she shared with me, that I really appreciated. And, I think sometimes we look at a woman that is doing it all, that does have the family, that has the work. And it is everybody's individual definition of that, right? So it's not some universal all. But usually there is something that makes it all kind of click. And it's been really interesting to learn about all of these women that I get to feature here.
Yeah, no, I think I'm inspired by what you're doing with this. So I can't wait to listen to the other podcasts.
Yeah. All right, we're going to do a lightning round of questions. Are you ready?
I think so.
Your go-to jam when you need to up your energy.
Break Free by Ariana Grande, and then also Roar by Katy Perry. We have some kitchen dance parties to those two songs pretty often.
I love it. We know you wake up early, but what time is early?
5 a.m.
What's breakfast look like?
Ooh, breakfast isn't actually that great. Between going to yoga in the morning and waking up early and then getting the girls to school, I usually will just do like a protein shake or a hard-boiled egg or something like that. But I'm not a huge breakfast fan.
A favorite ritual?
Probably my gratitude journaling.
Coffee or tea?
No, definitely not coffee. I'm a tea drinker.
Morning
person. Coffee gets me too nervous.
Morning person or night owl?
So I used to be a tremendous night owl, and I'd say that's over the last couple of years has been shifting to more of a morning person, but there's definitely a few night owl nights in there still.
The book you give the most as a gift?
Definitely Mindset by Carol Dweck.
What can someone do to help you feel appreciated?
This is going to sound super corny, but honestly, an authentic thank you, whether it's written in a card or whether it is, out for coffee and, or even just a hug and a thank you. That just warms my heart.
Do you want to know what is kind of chilling in terms of what I'm finding across all of these podcasts?
What's that?
Every single woman has said that.
Really?
Yes.
That's amazing.
It is amazing.
Yeah, there's nothing else that somebody could do to make me feel appreciated other than just an authentic thank you.
Wow. I love it. Well, I'm going to try to give that to you. I so appreciate your time and sharing what you've learned and your journey. I hope and I believe that what it'll do is show women that they can do it their own way by showcasing a ton of different women doing their thing their own way.
Absolutely. I am so honored to be on this podcast. Thank you so much for interviewing me.
It's been a pleasure.